Hey everyone, welcome to the Story Builder podcast. I am thrilled to be with Lesa Brackbill. Lesa is the author of 2 books, Even So Joy and A Brighter Blueprint. Lesa, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to have this chat with you. I'm thrilled to talk about your new book. Your new book is so fantastic and so well done and so well researched. I think we all need to learn more about it. So, let me just ask the big question here. How do you, as a writer, think, hey, I'm going to write a book on becoming an advocate or writing a book on advocacy?
Well, it all actually started with a simple question that was asked of me 4 years ago, but it goes further back than that, obviously. My parents would tell you that I have been an advocate since kindergarten, when apparently I convinced our entire class to vote for a certain candidate for president because we could spell his name. And so apparently ever since childhood, I have been wanting to change things and influence others for big things like that. So it naturally followed that when our daughter was diagnosed with a terminal rare genetic disease when she was 6 months old in 2015, that this all came back into play as well, because I learned that day not only that our 6-month-old daughter was dying, that she would die before she turned 2, but that if we had caught it at birth, we could have treated it. And had she been born across the state line in New York, we would have caught it through something called newborn screening. The emotions of that day still fuel a lot of what I do, because it was a mixture of grief and anger and frustration, but ultimately it came down to the idea that it doesn't have to be this way. And I see this pattern throughout my life of moments, both big and small, serious and trivial, of it doesn't have to be this way. And sometimes we say that with resignation, right? Like, it doesn't have to be this way. But I have turned it into, no, you're right. And this is why we advocate. And this is why we take these steps. So I've been in the rare disease advocacy space for 11 years now. And about 4 years ago, a friend of mine asked kind of a rhetorical question. And she just said, what does it take to be an effective advocate?
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about it, and it evolved into social media posts and then blog posts. And then about a year ago, it all came together that I knew exactly what I wanted to write about, because something I've learned is that advocacy is so much about the character we cultivate in ourselves. It's not necessarily about what it is we are trying to accomplish. If we are not the kind of people that are willing to listen and listen to understand, if we are not willing to operate with integrity and every other thread that I use in my book, we're not going to make a difference. No one will want to listen to us. And so it really honestly all starts with each of us.
I love that. And I love how passionate you are about it. I think it's so important that listening to understand, and especially when we're talking about advocacy, it's like these are important topics, often politically fueled. It's so easy to be like, oh, you have a different party than I do, so I'm just going to ignore you because I don't like you. And just like losing sight of the common goals, because we have a lot more in common actually than we think we do.
Absolutely. In fact, about 10 years ago, almost exactly 10 years ago, I had my moment where I actually became nonpartisan. I was in the middle of my second legislative attempt to reform Pennsylvania's newborn screening laws, and my bill wasn't moving. And I have a political science degree. I have some lobbying experience, and so I know how the system is supposed to work. But also, Schoolhouse Rock, right, taught us all, this is how a bill becomes a law.
Right.
Inaccurate. So my bill was just stuck in committee. So one day I was at the Capitol. I decided to go speak to somebody in the Speaker of the House's office. And so he took the time to look at my bill and to look through the history. And he saw the sponsor, who happened to be in the minority party at the time. And he looked me in the eye and he said these words that I do mention in the silver thread of my book, literally changed my life. He said, your bill is dead. They don't want to give in parentheses, the other party, I'm not going to name the party, they
Right,
don't want to
right,
give the other party a win.
right.
I sat there and he represented the party I used to belong to. So the sense of betrayal, disbelief, I honestly
Right.
don't even know. I just looked at him and my jaw dropped. And I'm like, I'm sorry. You don't want to save babies. You don't want to
Right.
do something that is nonpartisan. And they were like,
Right.
no. And that moment changed everything for me. And along the way, I had met people on, quote, the other side,
Sure.
who I realized they are human. I know that sounds funny, but in this hyperpartisan culture, we are taught to
Two human
demonize
groups. Yes.
Yes. And I realized we, like you just said, we were so similar in what we wanted. And so it has changed everything for me. And I did become officially nonpartisan, independent, because I no longer want a party to tell me what to do or what to think.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do the right thing, no matter who happens to be on that side.
Wow. I love that. I love that. That's on the surface, that sounds so like such a no-brainer, where it's like, I want to do the right thing. But then if you start like really focusing on, well, almost the behind the scenes, because that's what we're really talking about here, all the tension behind the scenes. How often would you want to ever give the quote unquote enemy a win? Like never.
Right.
So it's, I mean, that's if you view things through that lens, it's like, it's just, it's fascinating to me as you're saying that. I'm looking at it kind of through a story lens, and it's like even the villains think they're the hero.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, Lesa, even you and me, we're the villains in situations, or at least the antagonists, and we're wrong, or we're doing things we think for the right reason, but there's something else in the mix, and everyone's kind of viewing things from their own perspective. And I think that's why it's so important. You're like, let's just first listen and try to learn and gather information. What else did you learn throughout writing this book where it's like, okay, this really helps when I want to become an advocate?
Nobody's going to like this answer.
I like it already.
But the underlying foundation of this entire framework is humility.
Ooh.
Every single thread requires humility. Humility is the white thread in my book, because I just want it to be the neutral, like, base of everything. And I have learned throughout this whole 11 years plus just how much I don't know. How like you were talking about different perception and viewpoints, how mine is not, it's not necessarily right.
Right.
How I would hold on to what I believed to be true, and I was not willing to listen. I wasn't willing to unlearn, even when facts were presented to me. So as my favorite government teacher, Sharon McMahon, says, facts don't require our approval. And to accept that mindset does involve humility, because you have to be willing to say, what if I'm wrong? And that's actually something I really, really want us to normalize as a culture. And I talk about this, I don't remember which chapter, but I talk about the concept of systemic normalization. And I loved learning about that because we choose what is normal. We choose what is acceptable. And so if we're criticizing leaders who change their mind, and minimalizing it by saying, oh, they flip-flopped, they don't stand for anything, instead of learning that maybe they learned something new,
right,
and praising that, rewarding that, then we get stuck in this division because nobody is willing to say, hey, you know what, maybe they're right. So ultimately, humility is key. And no, it's not fun, but it does get easier the more you practice it.
No one likes to be wrong.
No.
Whether they're 84 or 4 years old, no one wants to be. And I caught myself even this week, Lesa, like I was listening to a couple friends chatting, and they're talking about all the things, talking about finances and saving for college and this and that and all these topics. They're just batting through all these. And I'm like, I think I was a little cranky at the time, maybe hangry, which people don't ever actually take that into consideration enough until they're like a parent and they see the toddler who's really hangry. They think, oh, adults, we've got it all together. Yeah, right. But I got really cranky, and I just started thinking, and I snipped off and I said, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, oops, I apologize. And it was really weird and awkward because I felt like, like I was wrong, but I did. I apologized. And I was like, I'm sorry. I really should have watched what I said. And I literally walked over to the library and got like a book on, what was it on? I think it was literally like reframing your mindset. Like it was a psychology book. And I was like,
Yes.
I'm going to work a little on this. Oh, it was positive psychology. I was like, I'm going to work on this a little because I think I was frustrated about X. And then I snipped out and, ranted at some friends about Y. And I was like, I think there's a line connecting between these things. And it was embarrassing. It's hard to be like, oops, I could be wrong. And also I realized, Lisa, in the instance, I was like, I'm really biased. I am looking for evidence to support my conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a biggie. And I realized that I was like, well, I can spout off X, Y, and Z. That's why I'm right. And y'all just don't get it. I'm enlightened. You're not, was actually the kind of track that was playing in the back of my brain. Talk about never convincing anyone of anything. That was like, shoot. Yeah, I'm definitely glad I picked up the positive psychology book. I was like, that was acting like a toddler, like.
And I love that you did that. You realized, hey, like this is something I should work on. I wish that we all did that more automatically, because that's where, there's actually a lot of psychology behind effective advocacy. I don't have a background in psychology, but I find it fascinating. And so it was really interesting to learn even how our brain creates shortcuts to help us think we're always right. And so that's actually why partisanship is easy. It's lazy. Like your brain is able to just be like, oh, the red side likes this, the blue team likes this, and you don't have to critically think and actually do your own investigation into things. And I thought that was fascinating because it's true. Like we all have so much going on. If something can be easy, but like just following your political party, why not do it?
Sure. Yeah, it's a shortcut. It's like go automatic. Yeah. Yeah, and it's so funny too when we don't like press pause, be humble enough to press pause and be like, oops, yeah, I made a mistake here or whatever. It's hard to move forward because before you know it, you say one silly thing that was off base, and then you say another and another and another, and that only puts more of a wedge between you as far as connecting with others. And frankly, like we said earlier, there's a lot more in common. There's a lot of these problems that, they're not necessarily super simple problems either, because the nature of advocacy, the more people involved, the more complex it gets, right?
Right. And something that I have really come to realize in the past 5 or so years specifically has been what you just said about how all of this is so complex and how little I actually know. So when I first went to the first newborn screening advisory board meeting that I attended, it was actually 3 weeks after my daughter's death. It just happens to be when it was. And so I went because I wanted to learn, like, well, what happens with newborn screening here? How can I impact it? Mm-hmm. But what I didn't realize was how my grief was blinding me. And it was and it fueled anger and just this resistance to what I perceived as their excuses, why they couldn't add another condition, why they couldn't do this, when in reality, so little is in their control. Public health is an amazing but very complex system, but it relies on money. So if the legislature is not going to give them money, they can't do anything, no matter how much they might want to help save these children. And so that's why I set out to fix these problems, which is something they can't do. So they have their lane and I have mine. Advocates have their lane because we have the freedom to go and try to change policy. And the book applies to way more than just policy. for
Sure.
sure. But that's where I learned all of this, and I saw it really play out. I was like, oh my goodness, if I take the time to actually listen to you, you reveal to me the problems that help me too. Like if I fix these, it helps everybody. And so that was really eye-opening to me. But again, it requires humility.
How do you stay positive when you're fighting the good fight? Again, yes, you're listening. Yes, you're staying humble. Let's assume all these all these good things are still happening. But when you're facing like one challenge after another, I mean, honestly, I feel like this is kind of like an onion where there's layers. Um, like how do you keep motivated and finding like, joy and positivity when it's like, I mean, it feels a lot like just one challenge after another in a lot of cases.
That's a really great question. And that's actually why I chose to start my book with talking about the need for resilience. The idea started as like sustainable joy, because it's true. You have to have something outside of advocacy that is going to bring that joy, to fill your cup, to use that phrase. You have to have something, because otherwise, especially in the work that I do, the public health realm, you will burn out.
Sure.
Because, or just be incredibly discouraged so much.
And cynical by default.
And cynical, yes, because
right?
so much is out of your control. And one of the stories that I guess I'll share, even though it's one of my favorite from the book. In our living room, we have a photo that has been enlarged that I took in Haiti in 2010. I went down to help after the big earthquake, and I cannot even begin to describe the devastation. Just driving through the streets of Port-au-Prince, I mean, rubble everywhere. There was nowhere to put it except for the ocean. And so they were just living life among the rubble. Wow. And it was stunning, and I will never forget it. But there's this one picture that I took that still continues to impact me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have it in my living room. There were these people that were living in the median of the road. Can think about it like a highway. I mean, it was a very busy road. They built their homes, their new temporary homes, in the median of this road because their homes had been destroyed. Right. And because of all the aftershocks, the Haitian people were very afraid to go back to their homes and to try to live there because the damage kept happening. So they used whatever they could find to build these very tiny, they must have been very hot homes, because they used like corrugated metal and things like that.
Yeah, that'd be toasty. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So I took this picture as we were driving through because I noticed something. There was a woman who was wearing a bright pink shirt, and she was sweeping. And remember, they're in the middle of a highway, and the road was very dirty because rubble everywhere.
Yeah,
really dirty. And she was out sweeping her porch. We'll call it a porch. There were tires that kind of made this little area that was an outdoor area for them. And I still just ponder that, because it must have felt so futile to her. Like, why am I sweeping my porch and my house when it's just going to get dirty again? But what I see in that is that she needed to do something to give her purpose. The rubble wasn't going to go away, but how she lived within it could be impacted by her doing those normal, typical things like cleaning your house, which nobody likes to do. But when you don't have one, all of a sudden, I think that means more. And so I share that story because it doesn't matter what you might be trying to change. It could be something massive like a law. It could be something much more simple, but still frustrating because you feel like people aren't listening to you. And so advocacy typically is a marathon. I wish it were not. I wish it were a sprint. Like you go ask one person and they'll fix it. But in the meantime, you have to have that thing, that the broom that she used, like what is your broom going to be? For me, it's reading and writing, but it's also gardening. We have a big garden in our backyard, and of course playing with my children, and just things that are completely unrelated to it.
Right. To refill.
Find what your thing is.
Right. That's incredible. Yeah, I had a feeling writing would pop up in the conversation. It does
Yeah.
feel a lot like that sweeping comparison. You're just kind of like, there's more to do. There's more to do.
Well, and honestly, yes, writing this book was sweeping for me
Right?
because we have been living in this, I don't know, I guess it's only been a couple years, but especially in public health, we've been dealt blow after blow in the recent times.
Mhm.
And it has felt like, what is the point?
Right.
What is the point of what we're trying to do if people who don't understand it are going to come and just wipe away the progress we've made?
Right.
And so that is honestly what I channeled into this book. It was kind of like, it was therapeutic for me in a way, just thinking through, what are these things we do have control over? We have control over how we treat other people, about how we are willing, like I said, to learn and unlearn.
Mm-hmm.
Are we willing to listen to other viewpoints and then consider that we could be wrong? Are we willing to work together? Which sounds simple and kind of kumbaya, but I have been blown away in advocacy about how people don't want to work together. And then that goes into the next thread about sharing credit and giving credit where it's due, even if it's the other party, the enemy, quote unquote. Not really. We're not enemies, but
right.
yeah, I felt like we needed something tangible that we can all be working on.
There's definitely a my way or the highway attitude that we all get at times. And I think that kind of even goes back to that humility where it's like, look, that sharing credit and even sometimes not getting credit is totally cool as long as you can, further the cause and reach the end goals, right? Versus putting your name on it. I mean, I guess so much of this is actually emotional. Yes. Where, it's like, hey, I feel slighted or whatever. It's just
especially when the reason you're in this, like for people like me, we're in it because we lost a child. So there is a deep, valid sense of injustice. And I am not invalidating any of those emotions at all.
Right.
But you still have to have these boundaries about how you interact with the decision makers.
So you started this book about a year ago, right?
I think formally about a year ago.
Formally. Okay. So probably more like a year and a half. What's some of the biggest things you learned? Because this is a monster project. This is not your typical memoir. This isn't self-help. This isn't like business or a novel. This is an entire framework with examples, from your own life, but it's like a framework. It's like a manifesto. It's a lot of things. This is not your typical book that you could just say, okay, I'm writing X. This has a lot more to it. It's such a challenging topic.
Personally, I would say I learned how far I have to go. And that's something that's really important, I think, for listeners to know, is I did not write this because I have it all together. By no means. I am maybe just a little bit further along this journey than the reader. And that's how I want it to be, because we all need to be working on this together. But more academically, I loved being able to dive into communication theory and to teach that through a few of the different threads, because my master's is in strategic communication. And it sounds boring, like when you use the word theory, but that is how we learn how to effectively message things. If we understand, like you mentioned, framing earlier, and reframing, that is part of communication theory. There's so much behind it that can help us craft better messages that are directed to the right audience. And so being able to bring in some of that and be a little bit of a nerd about it. But then, like I also mentioned, I kept, as I was like pulling these different threads, to use my own metaphor, I would find another psychological concept that I was like, oh. And then I along the way, I read some really good books, like one called I Never Thought of It That Way by Monica Guzman, I think is her name. Mm-hmm. And so good. Not like she's a really good writer and really entertaining, but she is trying to normalize that idea of, like we were talking about, being willing to admit when you're wrong, but also just to say, I never thought of it that way, and make this normal. And so I just had so much fun. And I'm sure there could be a second edition of the book at some point in time, or like a second, part 2. For now, no. For now, I think it's good. But
Right.
I just love learning, and I love figuring out how I can help others through my learning. How I can try to break down these really complicated concepts and make them more accessible.
What would you say to that individual who does want to, make some positive change in their community, even on a smaller level? Maybe it's local level, like your city level. You're like, I'll go through the steps in my mind, because I do have a former government background, but still I'm just a average citizen in the community. It's like, oh, well, I have to deal with, city council and maybe collecting signatures and, all the little things. And it's just like, do I really want to do this? Oh, and I have to talk to my neighbors. You know what I mean? All these things where it's like, it almost feels like, yeah, we mentioned it's like, can I just push a button? Can I just do a little signature, like those online petitions or something like that? Because I don't really want to go through all this extra, frankly, waste of time is what my brain would go. Be like, all this, because you're going to have small talk in between in these conversations, and are they home, and maybe phone tag and all these things. Like that, I feel like that's probably one of the biggest blocks for most people.
Oh, for sure. When I set out to change state law in Pennsylvania, I was beyond intimidated. I had absolutely no idea where to even begin. So what I would say to anybody that wants to change anything, you just have to have a conversation. It literally starts with a conversation with somebody, and they may not even be the right somebody. But as you practice, and like, for instance, with me, it was going to that advisory board meeting, learning a little bit more, figuring out, oh, there's the next person. So this is actually a concept called linking. Like, you're just creating links in your chain that will help you get to your outcome. Mm-hmm. And even if it was the wrong person I was talking to, they would say, you need to talk to so-and-so.
Right.
And a lot of people that were on my behind the scenes team for changing these laws, they were fantastic about that. They would, I could text them and they'd say, okay, talk to this person, but publicly they couldn't be involved. Right. So you just never know where you're going to find an ally. Yeah. But I have learned that if you go to them, again, with a posture of humility, and you talk about how you want to help them.
Yeah.
Like, you don't go and yell at them. And even though I know that feels good. You don't go and you don't yell at them and tell them how horrible they are.
I know it feels good.
Sometimes it does, right? Like, if we're really
my senators know me by name, I'm sure.
But when it comes to especially something local, it could be a couple of things. One, they may not even know that the problem exists.
Right. That's fair.
They really might not know.
That's fair, especially if you're at that higher director, mayor, leadership kind of level. Yeah, you have to think of all the mini balls they're throwing up in the air all the time. That's a great point. That's a really great point.
They may not even know, and it likely was not intentional. And that's something that's really important as an advocate to remember. It can feel very intentional when they say no. Right. But I've had to learn to use no as a data point, because if they say no, it might not be because they don't like me. There might be some logistical hurdle, and maybe they can't tell me.
Sure.
So you just ask questions and you try to figure out what they're allowed to say. But just remember that public officials, there are restrictions and limitations. And now that I am one, I can definitely affirm that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. As just in the concept of advocacy, I've realized I've actually been doing some of this, but I never actually put it under the label of advocacy, where I met with one of the local library directors, and I wanted to talk about some like local writer programs, but I also didn't want to come too aggressive at it about like, hey, why aren't you doing, it's like nobody ever gets anywhere by accusing and finger pointing.
No.
I kind of came at it a little more open-handed and like, hey, just get to know him, just talk about books, whatever, and that kind of thing. Then he's like, well, is there anything that we can do for you? And I'm like, actually, and I kind of jumped on that. And I still am at that point where I don't necessarily know what may come from a conversation. I know that's pretty common where it's like you follow up, you do your best,
Yeah.
right? You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I love that
like,
you brought up, not that your issue is less important. I don't mean it that way, but more, it's not changing a law, which I don't recommend to anybody.
No, it was just
it's really
just
annoying.
something. Yeah.
Yes.
Not everything has to be changing a law. It was more like,
Correct.
hey, what about this program? Or how can we improve this? Or just one thing I did that I think actually, and again, it was impromptu. It wasn't necessarily planned because that's kind of how I roll usually. But I was like, well, hey, here's an option. Here's an option. I came with like 3 different options, and it's like, it's a whole lot more calm, and that choice is kind of nice versus like, hey, I want you to do this. It's like just offering a few suggestions. I think it can resonate a little more because one assumption I think is fair to make is like everybody's pretty overwhelmed and everyone's pretty busy. So if you come at not overwhelm them with 3 choices, but they're all connected and related, and just saying, hey, well, what about A, B, or C? And I'm not necessarily even pushing that hard for any of the 3. I'm just trying to, make it practical for you. And that kind of thing. And I didn't realize under my mind, it was like, hey, I'm being an advocate for, local writers or whatever. But now I'm talking to you. I'm like, yeah, I kind of did that. I did that.
You did. And I guess I should have started with saying the definition I use in the book is basically noticing struggles and refusing to let them go unaddressed.
That's fair.
So it could be something like that. It could be something as completely trivial as us being denied our little sticker to get a special entrance into Hershey Park that we've had for 9 years. And they were trying not to give it to us. And so I'm so proud. I used my own steps, like from the yellow thread about like the Socratic method and asking questions to get them to see this is really ridiculous. And we got that sticker. So it can even work in the most trivial ways. But ultimately, I just want us to normalize the idea of working together. And like we said, we're not enemies. We are alike. We are all citizens of the same community or country or world. We all want basically the same things. And going at it with a combative attitude or being defensive isn't going to solve anything. And so many of the things that we face are policy choices, which really makes me angry. But it's a realization I had last year when I'm like, it doesn't have to be this way. Someone is choosing for this policy to exist, which means it can not exist. We can change it. It was written so we can rewrite it. And that has also kept me going, just knowing that nothing is actually permanent.
Right. That's a great point. And that's always encouraging. Some days it feels a little hopeless when you get bad news. And it's such a challenge, I think, for creators in general. And I mean, everybody faces it, but especially creators, because it's like, okay, I'm going to make stuff, but I'm also being distracted by just one negative thing after another. It's a real unique situation. And I think that saying, hey, you can say no to these things. You can turn off these things. You can press pause and step away and, do what works best for you. Otherwise you just burn out and, become that cranky, angry, screaming at the sky kind of person. And I think that's important not to be that, because you can probably get away with that around your spouse or your best friend or your counselor or whatever. But like, if you're like that outside of that circle, and if you're out like that all the time, it's like people are just not gonna interact with you. They'll just feel like it's you. No.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I always go back to in fact, I got to speak to a group of women about a month ago. And for the first time ever, I used a clip in my presentation. It was virtual. But one of my favorite movies is The American President, which is also like 30 years old now. So I'm feeling a little old. But that's actually the movie. It has Michael Douglas, Annette Bening, and that's the movie that came out when I was a teenager, and it inspired me to become a lobbyist. Literally, that movie.
Wow.
So his final speech, though, it's so powerful, and it has actually been something that I have used to encourage me throughout all of this time of disappointment as well and discouragement, because he focuses on the fact, in fact, he says, being president of this country is entirely about character. And so what I did in my speech was I turned and I was like, advocacy is entirely about character.
Right.
Like, because just what you said, no, if you are known as the person who's going to come and yell at them and accuse them of things they're never going to want to listen to. But if you come in humbly, willing to listen to them and to learn and to communicate with them and to make their lives easier, they're more willing to help you. So it really is all about character.
That's great. That's super inspiring. Yeah. It's also a reminder, like, this isn't like a one-time thing. This is a mindset and a choice that you're making every day, sometimes multiple times a day, to be humble and to have good character, and just helpful, I think, is a key word in there too, Lesa, because if you're not helpful and you're like, if like coming with some ideas for solutions, or even just listening is a way to be helpful, really, because you're like, okay, we're all trying to find common ground here. Versus being a whiner or complainer.
Yes, and I even saw that play out with my journey to change the newborn screening laws here, because I was set on one outcome. And I was like, this is what I want. And then as we started listening to the stakeholders, I began to realize, oh, actually, if we do this, it's going to help more families. If we switch and we do things their way, look at this, it's stronger. And so that's actually the purple thread of the book, is about being fluid and flexible, because, those terms can mean basically the same thing, but also different. But be married to the outcome, like the ultimate goal you want, which for me was better newborn screening in Pennsylvania, but be willing to kind of like change your course and to go with the flow, I guess you could say. It matters, because you don't know what you don't know. And I didn't know, like I said, that one little piece from that one stakeholder that actually made it so that we now have the strongest newborn screening system in the country to this day.
That's incredible.
So I'm so grateful that even before I learned these lessons, I was in the middle of learning them, that I listened.
That's awesome. Fantastic. Any parting words? Because I feel like that was an amazing conclusion right there. Any parting words for other writers, creators, folks like yourself, even doing important projects like you've been doing, that are, they're hard and you have to keep showing up, and sometimes that finish line's pretty distant. Anything you'd like to share or say to encourage any of the other folks out there?
Sure. I kind of want to actually echo something that you said too, about giving yourself permission to press pause, because I am very, very, very bad at that. But over the past year of understanding myself better and learning that I have ADHD and learning these different things made me realize why I don't write well under pressure. It has to just come, and that's what happens. It writes itself in my head, and I have to get it out really quickly. I can't make myself do these things. And if I am feeling burned out, then I have to step back. In fact, that happened to me in December. As I was nearing the end of writing the book, I just sat back and I read other people's books for fun. And I must have read 10 books in a row just because I had to hyper focus. I had to step back. And so give yourself permission to take a break, no matter what that looks like for you. Ooh. You don't have to go to especially in advocacy, you don't have to be at every meeting, every conference, every whatever. There will always be a place for you at the table.
That's fantastic. I love it. Any website or place you'd like for others to go to learn more about you? Obviously, your book, which is amazing, is on Amazon, A Brighter Blueprint. I can talk. Do you have a website too?
Yes, I write at thebrackbills.com. And then the book's website is a little bit longer, but it's brighterblueprint.patientadvocacystrategies.com. And that's the company I work for.
Makes sense. Awesome. Well, thanks again for being with me, Lesa. I really appreciate this. And I know many others will be empowered by your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.